All right, let's get started.
Yeah, welcome everyone in joining us today for Live with Sara and Tasha. I'm Sara Hodson, the founder and CEO at Live Well.
And I'm Tasha McRae, our Director of Brand and Culture here at Live Well.
And for those of you who didn't know, Tasha and I are really Live Well's original clinical exercise physiologists and health coaches.
Yeah, we are so excited to be able to join you through this live platform and to host these calls with you, just to be able to share our passion and excitement about exercise and behavior change to help you live your life to the fullest.
Absolutely. And as you will hear from Tasha and I, we are very passionate about this topic. And so we can't wait to dig in and share more with you. If you have any questions during our live today, please put them in the chat function and we will be sure to answer those towards the end of our episode here. And just a reminder, if you can see yourself, then we can see you also. So let's get started. Tasha, do you want to introduce our topic today?
Yes, today we're talking about growing a growth mindset. And this is so important because a fixed mindset is sort of the belief that change isn't possible. And when we're talking about our health and behavior change, obviously we need to have a growth mindset which says change is possible. So really, it's not a necessarily an easy thing to do. And sometimes we don't even recognize that we're stuck in a fixed mindset.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, we are maybe raised, or maybe it's just how as society we view that we have to fix everything, that if things feel uncomfortable, that signals to us, oh, something is wrong and needs to be fixed. And Tash, if there's anything that I've kind of learned from you and you really kind of digging in and researching this topic, it's that it's okay for us to sit in our discomfort because that is the only way we really move out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, and most of us live in our comfort zone the majority of the time. But I love that quote that says, a comfort zone is a nice place, but nothing ever grows out of there.
Mm-hmm.
We need to step out of our comfort zone if we're going to do things differently. And that's where a growth mindset is really going to come in handy.
Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes, and we see this in all of us, and we hear this from our members, that in order for us to kind of step out of that comfort zone, it requires us to be aware of what is holding us in our comfort zone. And so when we know what's holding us, we know kind of how to step out of it. So things like, we develop these avoidance behaviors, procrastinating, being late, busy, sometimes playing the victim or kind of acting helpless in a situation, or isolating ourselves, or even kind of things like oversleeping, right? And we hear those from our members, that those are some of the things we do to avoid actually stepping out of our comfort zone.
Yeah. And so, think about when you're in situations where you feel a little bit beyond your capabilities, or something feels, not as comfortable as you would like it to be, and pay attention, are those behaviors that Sara mentioned there, those avoidance type behaviors, do they creep in? Do you find your mind telling you a story that is more from a fixed mindset approach? And then how do we move into growing a more open or growth mindset where we go, it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to put ourselves out there, and that's a normal part of growth.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where setbacks are also a very normal part of growth. And so, when we're actually looking at kind of, what kind of setbacks become this signal to stop, right? And so we find ourselves saying, like, I don't have the time, this is impossible, even something is wrong with me. Allowing our mindset to really take over, and truly holding us back from living the life that we imagined. I'm just going to turn our little doorbell off. Okay, Tasha?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you hit an obstacle, which we're all going to do because it's absolutely inevitable, and so part of a growth mindset is, first of all, recognizing those setbacks are an inevitable part of life. They're an inevitable part of change, and that we need to reframe them. We need to reframe them as a launch pad for our growth. And so rather than avoiding and retreating, we want to draw on our resources. We want to surround ourselves with support, and then take learning forward with us that we can sort of work with in the future. And that's part of what we do in the Sparks method. That is spark number 5 in Stoke, is taking that moment to realize I didn't do well this week. Some obstacle came in my way. And rather than going, what can I do? Life is overwhelming, or, and letting those avoidance mindset or that fixed mindset set in, we spend the time to go, hey, first of all, this is normal. What can I learn from this situation? If I'm reflecting on, any time where I failed, I learn a lot about who you are, what it is that works for you, and then you take that information, and that can help you grow. So embracing almost failure can be what helps you grow and build that growth mindset.
And Tasha, you referred back to the Sparks method there. And so just want to encourage for all of our Live Well members who are participating and listening today, that health mapping course is available for you to really understand the Sparks method, and to really then help you to apply these things that Tasha and I talk about on a weekly basis on our live episodes. And so really, we talk about, getting comfortable with discomfort, not something that is easy for any of us. And so really, what is the strategy to overcome this? And as Tasha has been sharing with us, it really is about growing that growth mindset is our strategy. And so we want to spend some time with you now, really talking about what that growth mindset is, what it looks like, and what are actually a few things that you can do to help you develop that. Just like we have to build our bicep muscle by doing resistance training exercises over and over, there's things we have to do to our mind to grow a healthier mindset.
Yeah. And I think an important point is growth mindset is also shifting to a more positive mindset. And when we look around the positive psychology world, you don't want to be naively positive. We want to be realistic. And we talked about this when we were talking about self-talk a few weeks back. But pushing back our negative emotions can actually allow them to fester. So it's okay to be like, this is what didn't work, and be realistic with it. But then recognizing that it's only temporary, and I can move forward in a more positive way from this seemingly negative experience. Mm-hmm. So again, don't ignore the fact that there was a problem here, there's an issue, but we need to sort of get more comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. It's almost kind of like, and we talk about this a lot within our clinics at Live Well, that it's not about perfection. It really is about progress. And some of that applies to this conversation we're having, because when we expect perfection from ourselves, then we are almost kind of setting ourselves up for an inability to really grow into this kind of positive mindset. And so when we are able to identify and acknowledge and plan that it's inevitable that we're going to have setbacks. It's part of the process. In fact, it's a really good, healthy, strong part of the process. Then we're able to, almost like you said, Tasha, see it in more of a positive light. And it's kind of like when we psychologically, when we are prepared for something, we can kind of turn towards or lean into it a little bit more than if we're not prepared for it, where we're more likely to turn away and be a little bit scared and maybe kind of reject it and not be able to actually go, what is this teaching me?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So there's kind of 3 steps that you can use to get comfortable with discomfort. And we can use this anywhere. Interestingly enough, I have a son who's afraid of public speaking, who has to give a speech at school today. So this was a timely topic in my family. But how do we get comfortable in situations where we're uncomfortable? And, you know, it's not just things like public speaking. I mean, first we're talking to people who might be just uncomfortable with coming to the gym, uncomfortable with sweating and
Mm-hmm.
working hard,
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable with making different choices at a restaurant and inconveniencing the waiter with your requests. So you can, these may not be classic examples of what you might think about discomfort, but they are moments where our comfort is challenged and we have to step out and almost role playing those events before they happen, even if it's just in your own head, can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. And I think that this is also where, as we look at the high level of training and psychological development that can now come from the virtual reality of kind of really seeing something and visualizing it, that if we are able to visualize it, and this is a huge component of sports psychology and performance and Olympic level athletes and unlocking their potential, is visualization and visualizing the situation and having that positive moment in it. And Tasha, I loved your example there of kind of inconveniencing the server, that I don't want to be that person that asks for the grilled dressing on the side. I mean, I don't want to inconvenience anyone, but we're willing to inconvenience ourselves and our bodies and our health by then consuming the things that we didn't even really want to choose. I just think that I love that example, because for me, that would be a really real thing that I would do. And so that's probably something I could work on for sure.
And we're not always going to be able to spin it positive either,
Yeah.
right? You may be in a situation, in the waiter example, we could visualize us doing it and feeling comfortable and empowered, but there may be situations where you're not going to be able to move around it, and visualization is still helpful there, because you can feel. I'll give the example of my son. Imagine standing up in front of the crowd and feel your heart beating and feel that, and just sit with it for a moment and let your body be used to that feeling. It's like an acclimatization, right? And then to recognize at the end, I can feel these things and I can still be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I've Sarah and I both heard physicians speak about this in terms of eating behaviors and weight loss. To stand in or to sit in front of a piece of cake, a bakery setting. Do you remember when we heard that gentleman, that obesity specialist talk, Sarah?
Yeah.
And to sit and see what that feels like, to sit in front of it, to want it, to prefer to eat it, but to say, no, thank you, not today.
Mm-hmm.
You won't always make that choice, but to get comfortable with that, sometimes these little things, they create discomfort in us. And as we get used to them, they lose their power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the power of visualization. Yes, we can visualize the positive and help bring that to life, but we can also visualize what the things that we're uncomfortable with, and then get used to them so that in real life, if you will, they're not as scary when we move to the second part of the exercise, which is exposure.
Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, even if we continue down the lines of the same example of kind of the bakery or the cake or something in front of us, that when we are able to adapt our mind and grow our mindset to start to feel comfortable with, and it's not going to be perfect, but to start to feel and embrace and know those feelings, and to know that when we feel something, it doesn't mean we have to do something and be reactive and like, oh, that was uncomfortable, I got to do something different. To learn to simply sit in it and to feel it, so that when we do expose ourselves and we walk into that bakery, it's not like a cold call. It's not like the first time that we're doing it and we're going, oh my goodness, I have all these feelings, I don't have any self-control. It's that we maybe haven't practiced enough so that when we get to the point of exposure, we are going, okay, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but that it is easier than if we had not actually visualized this.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, be realistic. Don't expect to walk into the situation and feel, you're going to feel the same feelings that you felt in the visualization. And in fact, you're a little bit better prepared, but it's not realistic to expect that you're not going to feel that kind of negative emotion. Allow the uncomfortableness to come up because you've already practiced and you know through the visualization that you are going to be okay at the end of it because you're getting used to being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. And so then when we get to that point of we've now visualized ourselves in the situation, we have now actually exposed ourselves to the real situation, then this is where practice makes progress again. So practicing it, repeating the exposure, and repeating the visualization, repeating those and continuing to sit in the emotions and the feelings and building our confidence, building our comfort levels, building those components of it. And my daughter used to have a lot of anxiety that she was not going to be picked up from dance class, and so we moved through these three areas of a growth mindset to bring her to a comfort level. And at each stage, she would kind of rate herself out of 10 of, you know, okay, well, now I visualized it. Now, how am I feeling about it? It was an 8 out of 10 fear for me before I started visualizing it. Wow. Now that I visualized it, I think it's more like a 6. And now that I've exposed myself, wow, I thought it was going to be an 8, but it was actually a 5. And now that I've practiced it a lot, oh, now it's a 2 out of 10. And I really feel like I can do this. Right. And kind of giving ourselves a little bit of a scale there to allow ourselves to truly grow our mindset.
I want to come to Sarah's defense here. I remember when her daughter was going through this, and Sarah did not ever leave her daughter anywhere.
Never.
It was an irrational fear,
Yeah.
but it is a fear nonetheless, right? And
it was very fearful for her. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of this discomfort is you're trying things on and you're figuring out what your coping mechanisms are going to be when you're met with something that's really uncomfortable. And you know, we've all seen this come to play in our life. Like think about when, you know, you're starting a new job and there's a new skill set that you're having to do and you're very uncomfortable and nervous. And as you figure out that you can manage it, it just becomes rote. The things that used to scare us don't scare us anymore. And we can use that same principle here when we're talking about things around our lifestyle. And often, you know, we can do things in our work or our business life, but we don't translate those same principles into our health and wellness. And that's always an interesting thing that you know, you might be able to plan out a quarterly goal and a quarterly project and follow a plan and sort of visualize something and work towards something hard in one arena of your life. But in lifestyle, we tend to think that it should just all happen naturally. We should just know how to do it. But we need to really be methodical, just as we would in any other area of our life.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe as we kind of enter this week, if this is a topic that, you know, intrigued you and is something that you feel is an area that you want to add to your weekly practice plan, you know, maybe think of a situation where you feel uncomfortable and consider how your life might improve if you got a little more comfortable in this area. And so spend a few moments feeling the discomfort, visualizing it, and moving through exposure. And then as you move on, getting that practice in.
Yeah. And then reflect back and think about a time where you failed. And what did you learn about who you are and what works for you and how did it help you grow? Again, looking back and thinking about those times can help you recognize that if you stumble and fall as you're going through your current journey, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. And so as we move into our week ahead, we want to, of course, encourage you to meet yourself weekly. Find that time this week again, that where you're going to really review your weekly practice plan. Look at, does this fit into it? What are those 3-month healthy habits that you're using to work towards your health vision?
And of course, make a date with exercise. Go in the member portal, make sure that the dates that you have are working for you. If you're adding additional days of exercise as part of your practice plan, make sure you have a plan for those, you know when and where you are doing them. So important to actually have a planned and scheduled date with exercise.
And so in terms of questions, in just looking in the chat, and just a reminder that throughout our live event here, you can type into the chat and ask us any questions that you want. We are always recording these episodes to play back to our members so that they can learn if this time doesn't work for them for the live event. So if you have any questions, feel free to again type those into the chat. You know, one thing that I often kind of hear from our members around this topic is kind of like, you know, where do I start? How do I evaluate the things that I need to work on? I feel like all of this is new for me. You know, there's so much that I'm embarking on. And so, you know, where Tash and I have, you know, worked with our members and again, in the early days when it was just Tasha and I, is really about, yeah, there's a lot to kind of bite off sometimes in these topics. But what's just that first thing you think about? What's the first thing? And usually that could maybe be the thing that helps to make the biggest impact in your life. And just use it as a way to practice this. Maybe if it's something that you even think, well, I don't know how significant that would be if I went through this process with it. Use that as a tool to just practice the process, right? And to get used to it.
Awesome. Sara, I don't have anything to add to what you said there. So
Great.
I think if there are no questions, I don't see any on the chat, then we will close for today. I want to remind you, we're back next Thursday at the same time, 12 noon, and Sara and I will be talking about self-care. This is a massive project,
Yeah.
Self-care, so you know, we'll just talk about it for a bit and really dig into not only why it's important, but how do we actually make it happen. Self-care is interesting because often people think of spas and vacations, but really spas and vacations are a tiny slice of self-care.
Important slice.
We're going to be digging into the rest of it, even though Sara and I are all for spas and vacations.
We are. And so if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, don't forget to press that subscribe button and subscribe to get all of the content that we produce here at Live Well Exercise Clinic